Just after the Trans Day of Visibility, singer Ethel Cain, who is a transgender woman, posted a 5-side carousel on her Instagram account that included 2 images of her genitals on full display. The photo set, dimly lit with shadows and sepia tones, fit perfectly with her well-established Southern Gothic visual aesthetic. This account is only for those over the age of 18 and is not public. That is, people who have signed up to that account to get photos should therefore be aware that they are following a trans singer. Despite that, the post quickly drew attention online, and a lot of it. With over 1 million followers, posts about Ethel Cain's photos flooded in, most of which landed somewhere between support and reverence, with the photos framed as radical, provocative, or sensational. However, as is the case with the internet, negative reactions were just as prominent, featuring from confusion to outright aversion. Cain's post was removed in under 24 hours and, while it remained live, sat behind a sensitive content warning requiring users to click through multiple screens before viewing it. Now, regardless of your feelings about these photos, what is truly impossible to ignore was how immediately political they became. The speed and intensity of this politicization seems almost at odds with the photographs themselves. Within them, Cain sits, unassuming, appearing vulnerable and contemplative. The images are carefully composed, highly stylized, and aesthetically coherent with the rest of her feed. To put it baldly, they fit her brand. Nothing about this photo shoot introduces anything overtly political. Nudity online, including genitals, is nothing new. Artistic photography, including genitals, is hardly unprecedented. Seemingly, the only part that is shocking or radical is the fact that the genitals belong to a trans woman. Yet people across the ideological spectrum insisted on reading these images as political statements. Them magazine dedicated an entire article to the post entitled "The only trans visibility I care about is Ethel Cain posing nude on Maine." On the other side, TERF commentators were also reading their politics into these images. The disagreement was not over whether the post was political. Opinion was unanimous that it was. Discourse was only concerned with what kind of politics these photos represented. And yes, okay, look, timing played a part here. The post landed on April 1st, immediately following the Trans Day of Visibility. And it's hard not to read some degree of political intentionality into that. Moreover, the current climate surrounding trans rights means it is hard for many viewers not to see politics in the image. As one supporter argued, at a time when trans bodies are being policed like never before, it feels refreshingly liberating to show the full breadth of the same kind of trans body the Republican Party is trying to criminalize. But Cain herself made no overt political statement. There was no manifesto attached to the post. No caption about visibility, censorship, or rights. Just a moon emoji and a credit to the photographer, Dolly Cayenne. Several days later, Cayenne posted a more explicitly political message in which she described the photographs as, quote, a statement on trans rights, women's rights, and censorship. Despite the ferocity of the sentiment, however, Cayenne concluded with something strikingly apolitical. But simply, this is an intimate photograph of a friend I love so deeply and who inspires me every day. This reads almost as a line of defense of art for art's sake. A reminder that not every image containing a marginalized body must function as solely a political communication. On the one hand, you have 2 creatives refusing to turn their creativity into political statements. On the other hand, you have a deeply political response. So this raises an interesting question. Is the political climate so fraught when it comes to trans people that it is impossible for a trans body to appear online without being marginalized? This question was raised by Grindr in their official blog post on Ethel Cain's Instagram post. In direct contrast to Them's magazine's framing, Grindr entitled this article, "Ethel Cain posting full frontal isn't radical." Within the article, the author suggests that the immediate sensationalization of Cain's photographs revealed less about the images themselves than about the cultural inability to view trans people as ordinary participants in an already established form of artistic expression, such as artsy-fartsy branded photos. I quote from the article. The real story here is not the fact that Ethel Cain's posts included nudity. Trans bodies are so highly sensationalized to the point of becoming an event, no matter how they show up in the world. The images themselves are not especially shocking or provocative. They exist in an ages-old art form. In recent history, movements like #FreeTheNipple, along with post-cultural resistance to Puritan culture like Madonna's Sex Book and Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, have fought for human bodies to freely exist in art and society. What was once read as provocation pushed our society forward. Sharing nude bodies publicly, online and in real life, is more culturally legible than it has ever been. The immediate sensationalization and outrage of the trans woman participating in an already established art form is proof that trans people still do not have the pleasure to simply exist, to make art, and to be naked. Interestingly, a similar issue arises in the latest season of Euphoria, when Jules, played by Hunter Schafer, produces a painting featuring female figures with penises for a television set. The work is rejected by producers. Well, the reason for the rejection is somewhat ambiguous. Is the artwork being censored because it depicts trans bodies, or is it being rejected because it's simply inappropriate? What matters is the possibility of trans representation itself immediately becoming the center of the conflict. As soon as trans bodies are seen, the question is no longer whether the painting succeeds as art, but what political position it supposedly takes. Much like Cain's photographs, the work struggles to be encountered on purely aesthetic terms. The recurrence of this dynamic across both real-life controversies and fictional narratives suggests that there is something deeper at work. We have become increasingly accustomed to reading trans visibility as political speech, and the question is, why? The place I'm choosing to locate the blame? The internet. Before I get into this, I want to start by saying that my intention is not to dismiss the enormous role online spaces have played in queer and trans liberation. Since its inception, the internet has played a vital and undeniable role in queer activism. It has democratized political participation, connected isolated individuals to communities they might otherwise never have found, and enabled forms of visibility that would have been impossible in earlier eras. Yet the same conditions have also distorted political thinking. To be specific, because social media privileges the visible, the tangible, and the real, abstract political ideas are increasingly communicated through images rather than institutions. Under these conditions, being seen stands in for being free. As a result, emphasis has shifted away from sites of material political change. Instead, there is a political emphasis now tilting towards the more nebulous realm of visibility. Images and infographics are now being treated as powerful political statements, despite their limited capacity to produce powerful, tangible changes on their own. Generally speaking, and looking for a moment the bigger picture, this does not bode well for our democracy. Democracy is a laborious and expensive process, which can get it wrong over and over again. But equally, this system has codified human rights with all that entails. Rights for women, the disabled, rights for healthcare and education, rights for minimum standard of living, rights for transparency and accountability from our government. These rights may be occasionally acknowledged more in the breach, but they nonetheless do exist. In comparison, one consequence of this new system of politics based on imagery is that marginalized people are denied the ordinary freedom to participate in culture without being transformed into symbols. In this climate, every photograph becomes a statement and a form of political activism. This argument forms a central thesis of Trapdoor, a 2017 anthology that brings together a broad range of transgender voices to examine what its contributors call the trap of the visual. Trapdoor discusses the political and ethical implications of visibility and invisibility. Representation can be a deadly game. Now, this book, this anthology, Trapdoor, was initially published in response to Time magazine's 2014 cover story, The Transgender Tipping Point. It suggested that the increasing mainstream representation of transgendered people signaled an approaching era of equality. For example, figures such as Laverne Cox and her role in Orange is the New Black. The anthology Trapdoor challenges Time magazine's narrative. In his introduction, the editors pointed the simultaneous rise in anti-trans violence had accompanied an increasingly public visibility. Increased visibility, the contributors argue, does not necessarily translate into greater safety, rights, or social acceptance. Simultaneously, the Trapdoor anthology acknowledges the pitfalls of visibility for visibility's sake. It explores how contemporary media culture makes it increasingly difficult for trans people to exist first and foremost as people, rather than as political symbols. In this sense, it acknowledges visibility as a potentially dehumanizing force, reducing complete individuals to representations that others can debate, or celebrate, or condemn. Reactions to Ethel Cain's photographs were never really about the photographs at all. Instead, they were about a political culture that has become so reliant on visibility as a mode of activism that it no longer knows how to encounter a trans body without turning it into an argument. So, what can be done? Visibility remains important for the trans liberation, and retreating from public presentation is neither realistic nor desirable. But what should visibility look like? What kind of visibility can work? So here's another answer from me. Read fiction. Literature, unlike the internet, is not based around instantaneous clickbait visibility, does not reward immediate emotional reactions, but instead demands sustained engagement. Rather than asking readers to consume a trans person as an image, literature invites them to encounter trans characters as fully realized individuals. Moreover, fiction offers a degree of protection from the symbolic burden imposed on real people. Characters can embody ideas without becoming unwilling representatives of an entire community. And there's a strong backlog of texts here. From Virginia Woolf's Orlando to the Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. From the gender-ambiguous Greek gods to Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. It is said that the most functional and normal character in John Irving's The World According to Garp is the transgendered character of Roberta Muldoon. Contemporary literature continues this tradition. Take Ray Rumsby, The Prentice Boy. What is striking about this novel is not that it makes transness visible, but doesn't treat visibility as the sole point. Jesse, a starving workhouse child, initially passes as a boy out of necessity and self-preservation. As the novel develops, however, this performance evolves into something more complex. Jesse discovers a genuine comfort in inhabiting masculinity, while continuing to negotiate different gendered identities, depending on circumstance. Crucially though, gender is not the sole defining feature of Jesse's character. The novel is interested in their ambitions, fears, relationships, and desires, just as much as their negotiation of gender. Jesse's story demonstrates that gender variance can be significant without being all-consuming.